question. You talked about a lot of problems, and you made a pretty good case for them, and I think I believe you, but I don't see like solutions beyond being aware and having better programmers. Like,
yeah, that's well, and then
I wonder if you do.
No, I really don't. And I mean, the thing is,
I guess that's kind of what you're trying to do here, to some degree.
a little bit, but I can't do very much, right? By giving a little talk. So there's a similar thing that happened in the games industry, even. So I'm a big believer that your environment helps shape you tremendously, right? That's not a very controversial statement, I don't think. And the environment in making video games has changed a lot. So like I said, when I went into games, it was the absolute hardest time. But all the people I know, or not all of them, but most of the people I know who are the best game programmers came from that time when it was very, very hard. And to get anything done, you had to work really hard. And it was kind of brutal. I know some people who are from a little bit later times, but you know, for the most part, the best programmers are from the 90s, and we're getting old in games, right? And so that shift happened. So, you know, and what happened is it got easier to make games. There's all sorts of tools you can use. If you don't have very high standards, you can use, you know, garbage collected languages or something, and you take some frame hitches once in a while, but you just choose to ignore those. And it's basically easier. It's way easier. You don't have to do all that pixel by pixel stuff I was talking about. But because that challenge isn't there, it also means that people are not forced to rise to that challenge because it's not there anymore. And if you don't force people to do a certain level of discipline, they won't do it themselves, right? They won't. Very few people will drive themselves as hard as they would if they were being externally driven. And so in games, I feel like we don't have as many good programmers as we used to. It's not to say that we don't have good programmers, but there's a difference, right? And so when I say don't go work at a web company, it's analogous, right? It's like I feel like the environment there is not conducive to careful thinking or even understanding the system that you're working on. How could you, right? Nobody can ever understand everything between JavaScript on the client and, you know, the CPU on the server, right? I mean, the CPU is running UOps, so good luck. Good luck even understanding only the CPU on the server and nothing else. And so this insistence that the web has of trying to make things better by piling more and more layers makes it a worse environment for being a good programmer because you just can't. It becomes more and more about blindly flailing at things and trying to hit them until they work, and that's not good. Okay, someone back here had. I don't want to bias toward the front of the room all the time. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, from your point of view, like, would you say that, like, if you want to get into game dev, would that be a good career choice? Because I know we have some game developers in this audience. And I just wanted to get your point of view, because, like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I prefer it, but what are you interested in? If you want to make the most money, the answer is no. Unless you get really lucky or build your own thing, then you can make plenty of money, right? If you want to do creative things, or if you want to do technically challenging things, it's a very good place to go. So, I mean, games are probably some of the hardest things to make work in the world. Yeah.
As a web developer who's gotten relatively comfortable in this sort of mess,
Yeah.
And it's something that I have to like live with if I want to continue.
You don't have to though. It's
Right, if I don't
we all have to.
If I wanted to continue building stuff for the web, it's something I have to live with.
Yeah.
So, what, in your opinion, what's something that I should be aware of, or I should take into account whenever I work on web-related projects to sort of mitigate the bad things?
It's poisoning your brain. Be aware. It's like radiation, where the longer you're exposed to it. I mean, I don't know. I stay away from web stuff as much as possible, so I don't think I can give you very practical day-to-day advice because the web makes me so mad. I can't even begin to do anything on it anymore. I mean, yeah. I do it as little as I can. I mean, I would just say there's maybe some universal advice, though, which is just try to understand the system that you're working on. Even though it's impossible, if you understand a little bit more about it than you did yesterday, then you'll naturally find yourself coming up with better solutions and more out-of-the-box solutions than other people might have. And you might eventually see a way to make things better. Although after you think you see that, wait 5 or 6 years until you really see ways to make it better, because again, the problem with the web is people are just spewing, here's a new JavaScript framework this month, right? It's amazing. Everybody should use this JavaScript framework. Well, very rarely do people pop up to the meta level and say, if these frameworks are so great and helpful, why do we need another new one? Why didn't the last 27 frameworks solve the problem? They didn't, so you need the 28th framework, right? And tomorrow there'll be the 29th framework. So don't make another one of those. But if you live there long enough and just be smart, you may be able to. The web certainly isn't going away, right? And so hopefully it'll get better over time. And how does that happen? I don't really know, but yeah. Let's go way to the back. So I don't know over here yet.
What are your favorite games?
Oh, I don't want to spend time at a computer science talk talking about that. I generally like games that are creative and do something imaginative and new. I'll just say that. Standing up back there.
You brought up the idea of Ludo narratives, so like narrative playing.
That. Stop the question after the word ludonarrative. Like,
Yes.
That word, it's indicative of a whole line of thought that So there's this really old movie called War Games that was from before anyone here was born. The computer says it's a strange game. The only way to win is not to play. So that whole line of thinking about games in that way. The only way to win that is not to play. So I think if you look at games seriously in a very detail-oriented way, there's just a lot of things to be interested in, and most of them don't involve the words Ludo or narrative. It's just how I feel about it. Sorry. Over here.
You say you don't use Git. What do you use for version control?
I use Subversion.
Okay.
And the reason, and I have to tell people this every time they ask me why. So the reason is, things like Git are not naturally very good at handling binary assets, right? Well, there's multiple problems. The other reason, before we even get into that, is that I work in an office with some people who are not technical, right? And they're just doing 3D modeling and drawing cool pictures and stuff, and they want to get them into the game. And you can't really force those people to use Git. Something is going to go wrong, even if you use like a Git UI client, right? And then they're not going to know what to do. They're going to have to bug me, and I'm busy thinking about something. So that's thing number one. But number two is it does not do very well at large binary assets. So our repository for this game, just the local copy, is about 85 gigabytes right now. And maybe it's up to 100, I don't know. But that's just the current copy, right? We've got build machines. So we've got a world full of all sorts of cool stuff, right? Objects in the world. And the way we do lighting in that world is we pre-compute, we bounce lights around, right? And then we take a surface map on the thing and we save that out as a 2D bitmap. And there's a machine that updates all that so that people make changes to the world and then they check them in, and then the machine checks that stuff out and like bounces the light around and checks that back in, right? So 24/7, there's a stream of new binary files coming in of like updated light maps for all this stuff in the world, right? And that's exactly the kind of thing that Git is terrible at, because you'll just run out of space, right? Like immediately. And you'll just be spamming the network with, I don't know, it'll be crazy. So now there are workarounds for that. For Git and Mercurial and stuff, there's like ways of storing your binary stuff on like a side repository. And everyone who evangelizes Git is like, oh, it's great, why don't you use that? And it's like, well, because then your code and data aren't really in sync. And the problem is they need to be. Like if you change a file format, and you save the file out, the code that reads the file has to be exactly in sync with the file. If you step back to a thing and you get one and not the other, you're in trouble, right? So, I mean, if the solution is really manage multiple repositories that work differently, anyone can do that with any source control system, and you're just inviting a lot of problems again. And then again, the non-technical people are going to go crazy as well. Okay.
You mentioned a lot of times you know, the scale and size of like game projects being very different than say like web stuff that Facebook and Twitter does. So do you find that there's a lot to be like learned from like some of the game industry practices of programming?
If you want to do certain kinds of things, yes. I mean, the stuff that we're good at is making a program respond very quickly to input, right, in a real-time way, while it's doing something very complicated, right? So like this dude is talking about how like a Facebook feed is supposed to be complicated or something, but you know, you play a high-end AAA game, and like 60 times a second, it's manipulating a couple gigabytes of data, 60 times every second, and like making the buses of that computer like hum and like deliver all the stuff as scheduled, and like it's a whole different idea about what you can make a computer do, right? So if you're interested in that, games is a good place to do that. It's one of the best places to do that. If you're interested in building very high-level, very abstract things that don't care about being interactive or real-time, then there's probably other places, right? So if you're a neural network research person and that's what you think is cool, I mean, you could apply neural networks to games, but you can also apply them to a lot of other things. So, yeah. But definitely part of the reason why the web bothers me so much is because I know what computers can do. I wasn't kidding when I started this by saying this is an insane supercomputer compared to what I'm used to, and we don't do anything with it, right? This is an incredibly insane supercomputer, and like it takes forever to boot and runs Photoshop. Yeah. Anyway, beating a dead horse. Okay, you had your hand up a couple times.
Yes.
Yeah.